Hey guys, Mrs. Dan's here. So I'm using a new microphone. Hopefully everything goes over well. And remember, I am going to teach you like if you were sitting right in my class. So it's important that you copy the objective. We are starting with lesson 1 in our workbook, and we will be using the properties of exponents to help us multiply monomials. And then I would like you to do the do now for lesson 1. And actually, it would be great if you hit pause, did the do now on your own, and then checked with me to make sure that you did the do now correctly. Also, we will be going over the do now. We'll be doing some of the development together up to exercise 2. And then on your own, you're going to work on the simplifying chart. And you'll see what that is when we get to it. You will then check your homework answers, and then if we were in class, if there was time, you'd be starting your homework. So do your do now, and then check with me to make sure you did it right. So the do now is reminding you that the order of operations is important, but there are plenty of other properties that we use in mathematics to maybe help make our calculations a little easier. So we can use the commutative property, the associative property, the distributive property, the identity property, the inverse property, and multiplication by zero property. So it's asking us to find the product and use some of the properties to help make the computations a little easier. So really, if I use the commutative property, or even the associative property. I'm going to use the associative property. I want to group this. I want to do the 25 times 4 first, because then I could do 7 times 100, which is easily calculated to be 700. Again, I want to use a property. This time I'll use a commutative property. I'm going to switch the order of this. I want to do 2 times 5 times 56. So if I go from left to right, 2 times 5 is 10. And then if I multiply it by 56, again, a very easy computation, it's 560. So we should use our properties of mathematics to help make computations easier. And then another part of the do now was using exponents. Something you should recall is that there's a shorthand way of writing 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And it's 2 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th power. Number 4, a shorthand way of writing it would be 3 to the 4th power times 5 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th power. Number 5 I can write as 6 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th power, and x to the 2nd power. Notice in this one I didn't put a multiplication sign in between. When you have a number next to a variable, you assume that it's multiplication. But whenever you have like a number next to a number, like in this one, we do like to show the multiplication sign. I could have also used parentheses to show multiplication. And in number 6, I am going to use like the commutative property. I want to do 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times x times x times x times x. What I just wrote is mathematically equivalent. I just changed the order. So I can write this using exponents as 5 to the 4th power times x to the 4th power. And this is important for today's lesson. And this, again, is a reminder about the commutative property that order doesn't matter with multiplication or with addition. And with the associative property, you can group in different ways, both with multiplication and with addition. So we'll do the development together. It's so important for you to see that it says write out each of the following products. Okay, they want us to write part A as x times x for the x squared times x times x times x for the x to the third power. And then once you write out what it all means, it's easier to see that the final answer should be x to the fifth power. I think I mentioned in class that I'm really not one for memorizing rules. I like to understand where things are coming from. So I can see why x squared times x to the third equals x to the fifth. It makes sense to me because of what I wrote out here. So in part B, x to the fifth is x times x times x times x times x. And I have to multiply by x to the second, which is x times x. And if I were to write this in a shorthand way using exponents, it would be x to the seventh power, because x is being used as a base 7 times. That's what we like to say about exponents, that the exponent tells you how many times to use the base as a factor. Factors are things that are multiplied together. And part C, I can write it out as x times 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 x, which really, the shortest way of writing it is x to the eighth power. And some of you may be noticing something from the original question to the final answer. But again, I don't say like strange rules out loud. It all makes sense why these answers are what they are. Next page, so the steps to simplifying the product of 5x to the third times 2x to the seventh, and we have to justify each step by writing down what property was used. So if we start with this 5x to the third times 2x to the seventh, and we write it as 5 times 2 times x to the third times x to the seventh, really they just like rearranged the order, didn't they? This was like multiplication in here. This is 5 times x to the third times 2 times x to the seventh, and they rearranged the order. So remember, rearranging the order is a commutative property. Next, they took what we had and then grouped it. So grouping is the associative property. And this last step, I guess I'm just going to call the multiplication property, because really all I did was multiply this. 5 times 2 is 10. And the rules of exponents tell us that x to the third times x to the seventh is x to the 10th, but it's because I'm multiplying. So I'm just going to call it the multiplication property. I'm not really sure what else I should call it. And here in exercise 2, it's asking us to rewrite each of the following as equivalent expressions in simplest exponential form. So that means using like a base and an exponent. And again, I'm going to show my work. I'm going to write this as 2 times x 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 times 8 times x times x times x times x times x. You guys are definitely going to get the hang of this. You're not going to have to write out what it means, but again, if you can see what it means, you won't forget how to get the correct answer. I'm going to use a commutative property and do 2 times 8 first to get 16. And then I'm going to do x times 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 x. Oh, x is being used as a base 12 times. So the final answer is 16x to the 12th power. And if you notice, I really haven't talked about any kind of rules. I'm just using our properties, writing out what things mean, and I'm guaranteed to get the right answer. So in B, this is negative 4 times x times x times x times 2 times x times x. If I use a commutative property, I could do negative 4 times 2 to get negative 8, and x times x times x times x times x is x to the 5th. Finally, we have to be careful here. This exponent belongs to that parenthesis. So really the parentheses are getting written out twice. So this says I have to do negative 6x to the third times negative 6x to the third. Let's write out what this means. It means negative 6 times x times x times x times negative 6 times x times x times x. If I use a commutative property, negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. X times x times x times x times x times x is x to the 6th power. Again, I haven't really stated any kind of crazy rules I'm using. I'm just expanding it and kind of using common sense. Math always makes sense. If something in math is not making sense, you're probably doing it wrong. So just remember that math always makes sense. And then what I would like you to do is try some of these on your own and then check with me on your answers. So I'm going to ask you to hit pause and do these and then check with me on how I did them. I am always going to expand because I don't want to get a wrong answer. I'm going to do this maybe a little quicker than I did up above. Some less talking. Definitely still showing my work though. We do like to put numbers first and variables after it. Number 2, if I write out what it means. And the commutative property, I write the 2. I'm going to do the x's next. X is being used as a factor 6 times. Y is being used as a factor 8 times. This means negative 4 times x times 4 times x. Commutative property, I get negative 16. X is being used as a factor twice. This means 2 times x times x times x times this negative has to belong to a number. So it's really like a negative 1 here. This is what I'm writing out as it meaning. I would never say that a variable is negative. Its coefficient is negative. So that's why I want to write it as a negative 1. I'll multiply 2 times negative 1 to get negative 2. X is being used as a factor 4 times. Y is being used as a factor once. I don't have to put an exponent of 1. It's going to be a little bit to write out, but I don't want to get it wrong. I never get my exponents wrong because I always know what it expands to be. Right now it's like I'm writing it in an expanded form. And I like to take care of my numbers first. 5 times 2 is 10 times this 4 is 40. X is being used as a factor 4 times. Y is being used as a factor 5 times. And Z is being used as a factor 2 times. I like to put that crossbar on my Z's sometimes so that they don't look like 2's. Number 6, this says 8 times y times y times y times negative 3 times x times x times y times y times 3/8 times x times y times y times y times y. Notice I'm not complaining about showing my work because I'm guaranteed to get the right answer. I'm going to come to the side for a second, and I feel like doing 8 times the 3/8 first, and then I'll multiply it by the negative 3. And the reason why I want to do this is because I see that this 8 and this 8 simplify to be 1 over 1. And it makes my math easier then, that I'm just left with 3 times negative 3. So my coefficient's really a negative 9. I'm going to do the x's next. We tend to do alphabetical order, so that's why I am going to go with my x's next. X is being used as a factor 3 times. Y is being used as a factor 9 times. That's my final answer. And then number 7, volume of a rectangular prism. Volume is equal to length times width times height. So to find the volume, I really have to do x times 2x times x squared. If I expand it, this really says x times 2 times x times x times x. Remember, there really is a multiplication sign right here in between the 2 and the x. If I do my coefficient first, I get a 2, and x is being used as a factor 4 times. And that's it. Next is your homework. So I hope that was clear. And if you have questions, feel free to write me some questions. I am going to start being available for extra help after school at 2:40. So check that out as well if you need it. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.